Today we are going to make it work blush edition. Tip number 1, choose your brushes wisely when it comes to your blush. If you have a blush that is normal pigmentation for you, you can probably just use any of your favorite brushes. If you have a blush that isn't very pigmented and you find you can't get any color payoff from it, you may have to switch your brush. If you're using one that is kind of fluffy and not very dense, then it's probably not picking up as much color as it potentially could be. My suggestion would be to go in with a denser brush that is more of a buffing brush type of style because they are more densely packed. If you have one of the oval blush brushes, that might work better for you as well, just because they tend to be more dense and you can get more color payoff from them. They are going to pick up a lot more powder and product, so I would just be careful, build it up slowly if you have to. Don't go in with a heavy hand, because if you do, it could be disastrous. Even with a blush that isn't pigmented, if you do switch the brush, you might find that it's picking up a lot more. And the opposite end of the spectrum, if you are using a dense brush and it is a very pigmented item, you may want to switch to more of a fluffier brush. Another option besides a fluffy brush would be a fan brush, just because it's going to pick up a lot less product and it's going to be easier to get it on the cheeks. Again, you can always build it up if you're finding you're not getting enough product. Choosing your brushes wisely is one way to get the most out of your blush. Another way to get more color payoff from a blush that isn't pigmented would be to use a setting spray or MAC Fix Plus or something like that. For this technique, what I would do is I would take my blush brush and I would put it in the blush, get the amount that I want on, and then spray it and then put it on my cheeks. And again, do the same thing. Put it in your blush, spray it, and then put it on your cheeks for the other side. And this is simply so that you're not sticking a sopping wet brush into your blush. That way you're not ruining the product at all. You're just putting the product on your brush while it's dry and then spraying it, and then it's not doing anything to the product in the pan at all. Another thing that you could do to try and amp up that color is to use a cream base, either a cream highlighter or a cream blush or that sort of thing underneath it, and then put the blush on top. It is a little bit harder to blend it out when you do that, so I would practice it a little bit and maybe go easy with it, especially a light hand. You will find it probably around the edges of the cream that it might be a bit harsh, so you might have to do some extra blending, but that is a way usually to get your blush to work a little bit better. Number 2, if your blush is going on patchy and you're having a hard time blending it, try using a translucent powder or a similar colored blush with it, and it might give it a little bit of slip and blend it out that much easier. So what I would do is I would take the powder a little bit on my brush and then dip your blush into the blush and put it on your cheeks, and you will probably find that it's going to blend out a little bit better. You might also find that it's not going on as pigmented as you would like. You might have to build it up a bit, but it should help with that patchiness because it has that extra medium in it to just kind of help it blend. Again, if you do this technique with a different colored blush, I would use the blush that you don't want as your dominant color first, so swirl your brush in that and then go into the color that you really do want and put that on your cheeks, keeping in mind that you might get a lot more color payoff that way. So go in really light-handed with that as well, because you don't want to look like a clown. Maybe you do, I don't know, I'm assuming you don't. Number 3, you overdid it and you look like a clown. What do you do? So I take a big fluffy brush, dip it in some translucent powder, and just blend, blend, blend until you get that color to go down. And then before you switch to the next side, just rub it off on some paper towel just so you're getting it as clean as possible. Dip it in your translucent powder again and blend, blend, blend. This on its own usually works. It's a great technique. However, sometimes it is not enough if you've gone like overkill on the blush. So the other thing you can do is take a sponge, a damp sponge, especially if you've used one earlier for your foundation, but even if you haven't, just take a damp sponge and try and blot that blush off. It usually will come off. If you're finding that it's not, you could even put a little foundation on your hand, bounce it in, and then just bounce it kind of around on your hand a little bit just to get that foundation off, similar to if you had used it on your face and you just have a little bit left on your sponge, and then just kind of go over it that way. You might need to use your fluffy brush and go over it with some translucent powder, but it should really take that color. Worst comes to worst, you can always go in lightly with the blush again if you have to. Tip number 4. You put your blush on and 2 hours later it's gone. It's like you never put anything there. My tip for that would simply be to use a cream base. You could use, again, a cream highlighter, a cream blush, either of the same color or a different color depending on what kind of look you're going for. Another item you can use is an eyeshadow primer. Now you want to make sure you haven't powdered your cheeks yet at this point, so put it on after your foundation, but if you do powder, put it on before you put any powder on your face. And then you can just put your translucent powder on or your setting powder on, and then you can go in with your blush. I find that this technique doesn't necessarily last as well as a cream product underneath my blush, but sometimes I don't want a highlighter or a cream blush underneath my blush because I don't want to change the color or the look of it. If it's a matte blush, I don't necessarily want to make it look shimmery with a highlighter underneath, that sort of thing. So in those cases, I do enjoy using an eye primer underneath, but just keep in mind, you don't want that primer underneath the foundation. You want it over the foundation, but underneath your powders. And number 5, you have tried everything. You cannot get this blush to work. It sucks. It's awful. You don't like the color on your cheeks and you're not going to use it, but you paid for it. So it's in your collection and you don't want to get rid of it because who knows? You're attached to it for whatever reason. Here are some things you can do with it besides, throwing it on the floor, shattering it, and getting rid of it. The first way you can use up that blush is as an eyeshadow. A lot of times blushes will work well as eyeshadows. You might find that there's a little bit of staining on your lids from the pigment, but for the most part they are usually safe to use on your eyes. If you're concerned about it, you can always look it up to find out the ingredients and see if it will be damaging to your eyes at all. But for the most part, most things aren't going to be damaging to put on your lids. They just might stain. Another thing you can do with your blush is to make it as a lip stain. And to do that, you would just take some of it, and I usually just kind of scrape a little bit out and put it on my hand, and then I take a lip balm and I just kind of mix it in with that, and then I dab it onto my lips and you have a lip stain or a colored lip balm. And the last thing that you can do is similar to the lip stain. You want to scrape a little bit out, take some clear nail polish, mix it together and put it on your nails. It can make a really lovely nail polish as well. And those are my tips on how to get your blush to work for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.